Let's get
Okay,
into the pursuit of happiness, shall
all
we?
right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the third episode of the Empowerment Podcast. Last episode, we talked about time management, a day in the life of an NFL player, and we dove deeper into what it means to help someone develop their character. The topic we'll explore today is one that is hopefully near and definitely dear to everybody watching this episode. It's been keeping some of the brightest minds from all times and all cultures awake at night, trying to figure out what it is and how to achieve it. Happiness. In this episode, we'll talk about the foundation upon which we establish our goals and plans for being happier, which is our definition of happiness. If we can accurately describe what happiness is, then we can plan accordingly. But if we don't, then we open ourselves up to the risk of going somewhere else. It's something that is often overlooked, which can cause lots of regret in the later stages of life. This will be the first part. I so wanted to do this in one episode, but happiness is something that I'm researching for my school. So I've been looking into Asian wisdom, Buddhism, Dalai Lama, Epictetus, all the way to the neuropsychological research that's been done in the last couple of years. And then a while ago, I watched this great docu-series on happiness made by Will Schoder. The link is in the description. He opened me up to Dan Haybron and others, which really added structure to the things that I've been gathering ever since. I ended up writing about 40 pages on the topic, and I really can't do them justice in one episode. So we're going to start with a definition, then move on to plans, goals, roadblocks, and ways to achieve them in the following episode. But before we get into any of that, Gary's been doing some interesting things off camera, traveling to Europe, giving speeches, meeting interesting people. What can you tell us about that? How did you go about traveling to Italy? And to keep up with the theme here, did the trip make you happy?
Great segue, great tie-in. Yes, I have been globetrotting around the world, spreading the message of the bridge and happiness, to say the least. No, I was summoned to Vatican City to speak at the Elite Global Leaders Conference, which was a kind of a collaboration of real estate investors, some of the top family offices in the world, um, royal families, just CEOs of companies, some of your like top people like the Bezos family, Gates family, a lot of representatives from their family offices and things like that. And I came to speak actually as a keynote speaker. And it was in place of Akon, who was supposed to be speaking about his smart cities and his Light Up Africa initiative through his nonprofit. But he had some scheduling conflicts, wasn't able to make it. And I guess I was there next up. So they reached out to me, asked me if I was vaccinated, if I had my passport, if I was able to hop on a flight and come out and talk to them about what it is the bridge does, which is a lot. So I kind of summed it down into a subject line of investing in urban communities is key to achieving sustainability targets. And pretty much all I did was share my story. As one of those kids from the inner city in an urban community, I was invested into by somebody much more affluent than myself, and Milton Hershey and his company and him founding the school I went to. That was really what changed my life, saved my life, for that matter. And it was hunkered in education. Um, so that's what I shared, just like we need to invest in infrastructure as well as education in our urban communities intentionally. And this will allow us to be as a global society more sustainable, which allows people to make more money, impact more people, and protect the planet longer. So that's what it was. I explained myself. I explained the bridge briefly. And then I went to hop off stage and looked up and got a standing ovation. Everybody in the room was up and clapping, and not a dry eye in the room, when I was sharing parts of my story. So it really resonated with a lot of them. And it was pretty much, my mantra of perseverance through adversity, that a skilled sailor is not made on calm waters, essentially that like each of our lives are going to give us opportunities to grow as individuals. And it's up to us to how we channel that energy into productive things. But then the standing ovation was a surprise, and then they came up to me afterwards. It wasn't just the conference where we had our presentations and such. We also had networking events and dinners and things throughout the few days that we were there. So we got to sit down and ask questions of each other, get to know each other a bit more. And a lot of people were interested in who I was and my story and what the bridge was about. and ways that they could get involved, beyond just donations, but actually as investors and partners and, things like that to really move the initiative forward. So all in all, a great trip. Definitely provided some happiness, I'd say, no doubt. I think that love and belonging, intimacy, kind of looking to better humanity. I do believe those things are certainly parts of happiness, at least in my life. So it did, and it's moving the bridge forward. So that's a great thing.
Yeah, it's beautiful, and especially the thing with persevering through adversity that got you there, right? Standing there and getting the ovation that you received is it's amazing, and it goes together with happiness. So, how would you define happiness?
I'm a simple cat. You know what I'm saying? Like, I know that there's been some pretty astute philosophers that have gone into, these things. And I honestly, I equate happiness to peace. And for me, the only ways that you really accomplish peace, it's kind of, I'd say mirrored or parallel to Maslow's hierarchy of needs in a way, but it's not a pyramid. I think it's more of, some concentric circles, and you kind of start on the outside and work your way in. And in order to get even, the first layer of peace or happiness, like it's food, shelter, and water. Like in my observations of humanity and society, those who end up being homeless oftentimes end up using drugs and alcohol. And in most cases, humans use drugs and alcohol to change their state, and to me, they're changing their state because they're houseless. They don't have a place, shelter or food, or be able to provide for themselves, right? So like, I don't think there's much peace there. And the only way they get peace is by changing their state, right? Using drugs and alcohol. So there's still the pursuit of happiness in a different way, right? But they're just looking to remove themselves completely because their needs haven't been met to find that happiness. But the way we should, do it, take care of our basic needs, like you feel safe, we have, family. Like there's not one there is one definition for happiness, but I think it's a complex thing. But it's also fairly basic, right? Like I think humans can be very happy by only having their basic needs met, right? And I think as we move up through our society and start to add a bit more intimacy and relationships and accomplishments and some of those things, that can actually take away from happiness, I think, in some cases, right? So if you just focus on the basics, right? Food, shelter, water, reproduction, safety, security, like those things, like that should be a constant generator of happiness, but again, once we start to distract ourselves away from the basic needs of humanity, like what it means to be an animal that lives, I think we do start to cloud the water a bit, but I think that is consistent across all people: food, shelter, and water. If you don't have those things, I don't think you can have any other form of peace or happiness.
That is true. And you touched on a lot of great things that have been said by these astute philosophers that you were talking about. So I've been writing the first thing that you were talking about. I wrote 3 definitions that most people have. There are 3 big categories, or actually 2 categories. Most people fall under these 2, and then there's a lucky third. I'll describe each and present my opinion about them based on the research I gathered and thinking I did on the topic. One of them is dangerous, is the one that you described with what a lot of people do is chasing pleasure by trying to escape. The other one is incomplete. And the last one is what I personally think is best. So I'm curious to see what you think about each. So the first one is hedonism. The hedonistic theory of happiness basically states that the higher your pleasure to pain ratio is, the happier you are. All pleasure, from the one caused by drugs or sex to the one caused by a good meal, conversation with a friend, or reading a good book. So whatever happens, if you feel more pleasure than pain that day, based on the hedonistic theory of happiness, then you are happier that day. But there are flaws with using that as your theory of happiness and acting on it. Firstly, because when you play with pleasure that way, it's like playing with fire. If misinterpreted or misused, which it is more often than not, hedonism theory can encourage us to engage into addictive behaviors because they can give us short-term happiness or pleasure. But the thing is that our reward system and our brain in general is very good at adapting. Your tolerance to pleasurable things increases the more you do them. If you don't know how to adjust that pain to pleasure ratio, then you can easily fall into addictions. And we all know how big of an impediment that is to happiness. And besides that, it can cause you to not engage into painful or uncomfortable things that result into meaningful results because the pain to pleasure ratio may not seem right to you. That can prevent you from getting stronger. That can prevent you from persevering through adversity, like Gary said, and growing as a person, which again can be a long-term impediment to happiness. The theory, besides leaving you with a predisposition to engage into addictive behaviors, is also wrong from a theoretical perspective, because happiness is more of a general psychological condition rather than a sequence of pleasurable experiences or a ratio in between the amount and intensity of happy time you get compared with the unhappy time. Putting all good feelings under one umbrella is dangerous, and it can easily be misunderstood, which it is by many young people who feel encouraged to engage in careless activities and disengage in important ones because they hold on to the theory of hedonism as their theory of happiness, opening them up to a array of consequences on the medium term or on the long term that will ultimately stand in their way of happiness. So generally, people who chase pleasure and who they see pleasure as an ultimate form of happiness are inclined to engage into a lot of behaviors that will damage their happiness on the long term, because pleasure is not happiness. What do you think about that, Gary? How do you see hedonism, especially the one put in practice by my generation, and also maybe the one put in practice by football players?
Yeah, I don't, it's not the best checks and balance type system, right? Pursuing all those pleasures, I don't, that certainly will lead to addictive things because those pleasures release chemicals in our brain, right? The serotonins, the dopamines, the things like that. And as you stated, at some point in time, you need to do more of the thing it is you were doing to release those chemicals to give you that state of euphoria, right? Or feeling of good or ecstasy, whatever you want to call it, right? But our bodies adapt, right? So you need to do more and more of those things in order to get the rush it is that you wanted, and it will eventually plateau, leading to you pursuing these vices or these outlets in a very relentless way, which is an addictive personality, right? Because you are looking for that release of chemical. Now, if you balance, which I don't really like the word balance, but if you, I guess, moderate and you're intentional with the pleasures you're getting, and if you spread those pleasures over multiple things and you tap into one and tap into another, then I think they're going to release different types of chemicals. An example, it's okay to have a cheat meal periodically, right? And have just that your stomach is hurting, you got, you're tired, but your brain's releasing all these chemicals like it felt good. One meal ain't going to kill you. Now you do that every day, 3 days a week, right? You're eating stuff you're not supposed to be eating and it's releasing all these chemicals. Your sensitivity to those chemicals gets less and less, right? So it's no longer, when you ate the grilled cheese yesterday, it felt amazing. And now you ate the grilled cheese a week from now, and it's like, I need to eat 2 grilled cheeses to get what I felt before, right? But that's bad, because what are the effects of that? You eating more than one or more than what you're supposed to, and indulging in a behavior, whether it be drugs or alcohol or sex or too much food or video games or water, right? Too much water could be bad too. These things
Can kill you.
Right, dull your I guess the potency of them, right? And I always go back to this quote here, and I might mess it up, but I might not. And it goes something like this: don't sacrifice future blessings for temporary pleasures. And I think when people are pursuing things that make them happy, those are temporary pleasures. And a lot of cases, when you get too much of that, it will hurt future blessings, right? Whether it be your body, your relationships, your businesses, whatever it is you're doing. So I don't think that that's the most sustainable way to sustain happiness. It may be a good way to get it temporarily, right, and feel happy in a moment, but definitely not happiness longevity. So what's the next one? What's the next?
The next one we have here is the satisfaction theory. Another way in which people define happiness and choose to go after it is through the satisfaction theory, which is based on how well one's life is based on their own standard. It's made by Ed Diener, one of the fathers of happiness research, and it's pretty complicated the more you get into it. But basically it says this: if you are satisfied, then your life is going pretty well. And obviously that's good. It's great even. What's the problem with chasing that as your goal, you might ask? Well, there's no problem with chasing satisfaction, but the problem is that many people mistake satisfaction for happiness. So they dedicate their whole life chasing satisfaction, thinking they'll get happiness out of it. And when they grow old, they had a good job, they have good degrees on the wall, accomplishments, respect, money, a long-term relationship. And they find that although they're satisfied with where they are in life, they're still not happy. And that's because of the cognitive affective divergence theory, the phenomenon where the assessment you make about yourself and the world around you is not in accordance with the emotional feedback you receive. Our judgments, our evaluations can diverge quite significantly from our emotional state. And it's all about perspective, and that is very subjective and sometimes irrational. As part of trying to be happy, people focus a lot on impacting external elements while losing sight of the internal ones, forgetting about the relationship between the two and how they need to have a symbiotic relationship in order to achieve happiness. This mismatch in resources spent on one rather than both reflects on the mismatch in between their external circumstances and their internal mental states, causing them to be unhappy. The biggest flaw against using the satisfaction theory as a theory of happiness is that successful doesn't mean happy. But don't quit your jobs just yet, because as much as success doesn't make you happy per se, don't go on the other end of the spectrum thinking that it means nothing. Because beside all the things that you get from being financially comfortable, having all your needs met, which can change people's lives, you also get things like engaging in meaningful work, feeling like you have mastery over a skill or a number of skills, achieving meaningful goals, and feeling like you do something of value that has a positive impact on other people. Those things will make you happier, and they are part of the satisfaction theory. So again, in this one, it's not all bad, it's just incomplete. So what do you think, Gary? What do you think about people mistaking satisfaction for happiness? It's a pretty common trap, and you seem pretty happy and satisfied, so you must be up to something there. What do you think there should be the balance in between satisfaction and happiness, and how can we find it?
To me, it makes me think of the time when I was studying some Buddhist theories, and it was one thing they were talking about, like, don't I think it literally said this, like, don't put your happiness in outward things, like whether that literally be a relationship with somebody, or like, oh man, this chair makes me so happy. And this was their reason for it, that outward things are ever changing, right? Like if you see a chair that's sitting in the middle of a room and you come back tomorrow, that chair may look the same. Come back in a year, it may look the same. Come back in 10 years, it might look the same. Now come back in 100 years and that chair will not look the same, right? Because every single day it was changing, right? Even the things that you think are unchanging, all things outside of yourself are ever changing. Now, the way that they said, the way you get past that is by putting your happiness in Brahma, enlightenment, God, right? Inward love, essentially, for yourself. That's where happiness truly resides, right? It's not in the outward things, because those things are always changing. Even the people that you're married to, relationships and things like that, which is not a bad thing. Like, that's okay. But if you attach your happiness to this ever-changing thing that is not finite or infinite, excuse me, it is finite and not infinite, as the love of God, if you will, if we're going to make it intangible. The fact that it is intangible and you need faith for it, it is unchanging, right? And when I don't care what religion you're in, the connection between you and your God, the higher up, the creator, whatever it is unchanging and will always be. But your relationships, your interactions with these temporary things, because that's exactly what they are, whether they seem like they're forever or not. Even Earth itself is temporary. It's not infinite, right? So like that's kind of what they were talking about. So that's kind of what I was thinking about as you were explaining that theory. And I would agree with it. I think you can certainly find, again, temporary happiness by having happiness in other things, but that again is not sustainable, right? There's not longevity in that happiness, because those things that you think are not changing, right? The things that you've held fast to in reality are changing daily. So eventually they'll shift themselves out of the Goldilocks zone of your happiness and no longer cause you happiness. The chair that was so comfy, every day it's getting a little less comfy. So eventually it won't be comfy, right? You won't be happy there. Saying like, so the point is, don't put your happiness in the damn chair. Put your happiness in something else, right? Not outward things, but more inward. And I mean, I also, being successful in some of those things, like, yeah, happiness in the moment, but like, it's the process, right? That people truly enjoy, right? This is going to be a little tangent here, but I think it might line up. Like, I've been to the Super Bowl, and the Super Bowl was just a regular football game, but the lead up to the Super Bowl is what was like, the media and the
About
fans,
it, yeah.
kind of similar to like, Christmas or, any other holiday, right? It's the process, the lead up to it, and then it's gone, right? So same type of things. Like, you find happiness in something that one day will eventually be gone. So don't put your happiness in those things. It's going to change. You got to keep your happiness within yourself.
That is great because it's actually leading exactly into the next thing that I wanted to say.
Well, what's the next one?
So the next one, so we arrived at the D theory of happiness here, at least my preferred one. We have the emotional state theory. Big thanks to Dan Haybron for making it and Will Schoder for explaining it so well in his docu-series on happiness. It's pretty complex, but it's basically made out of 3 spectrums that measure different types of psychological states and one that measure your propensity for them. If those combined are in the right place, it means their emotional condition is, on the whole, positive. Happiness as an emotional condition consists of 3 dimensions of central affective states, which are 1, endorsement, meaning how joyful and cheerful you are; 2, engagement, which basically consists of your level of excitement towards something; and 3, attunement, which is a psychological state of calmness, confident in yourself and in your safety, calm and able to relax. All these 3 together with your mood propensity, which means how easy it is for you to shift on different sides of the spectrum. So basically, how easy it is for you to reach those emotional states I described based on how much external situations or thoughts or a combination of both affect you. So again, to put it in one sentence, if all these 3 moods are up and they're not fragile, so they don't go away easily, then you are happy. And now, I think it's very important. I think you see how important it is to be very clear about your definition of happiness. This definition is focusing on your whole array of emotional states rather than on one, pleasure, or on potential sources of good emotional states like the one presented in satisfaction theory. It's very important to establish that because once you do, then you can make the right goal. And once you have the right goal, you can start formulating a proper plan. If the definition is flawed, then the foundation upon which you put the goal in the plan is compromised. If you spend your whole life thinking that pleasure is happiness, then you'll think that happiness is something that is fleeting, predisposed to hedonic adaptation, and that all humans are inherently sad. It's our destiny to suffer and to feel that suffering into our core. And if you spend your whole life thinking that satisfaction is happiness, then you'll be a slave to your external circumstances. When you understand that happiness is an emotional condition that is vastly depending on something that is in your control, which is your perspective, the way you interpret things, then you can do something about it. And you would be surprised to see how much happier you can be once you start making an effort toward positively impacting your internal world. The most important lesson I want people to leave this podcast with is that happiness is not a point on a map or a point in your life. Happiness is a point of view. And although it is connected with it, it's not dependent on your external circumstances alone. Happiness is based on the way you see the world, the way you interpret and handle stressors, the way you identify with yourself, and the way you interpret your relationship with you and the external world. You can't control the level at which you adapt to stimuli that cause pleasure, and you can't control most of your external circumstances. But luckily, you don't need to in order to be happier. It's something that humans are and have been discovering cross-culturally throughout millennia. It's one of the most important lessons that you derive out of Christianity, Buddhism. It's what Epictetus, a Greek philosopher from 2,000 years ago, and Dan Haybron, a philosopher who's alive today, are talking about. You hear it in different ways, explained in different forms, but the message is the same. Don't focus on external circumstances more than you need to in order to survive. It all comes from your mind. Heaven is within. We all heard that. It's all about the way you see the world. Focus on acceptance, focus on gratefulness, focus on compassion, on love, create a center, strong moral principles, and protect them at all costs from all forms of negativity, from hatred, from jealousy, from self-doubt, because that is your core. That is your source of love and happiness. We spend our whole lives looking for it outside of us when the answer has been within us this whole time. The source of happiness is not something that is material. It's not something that you can point to. It's deeper than that. It's a way of seeing the world. It's a way of looking at your fellow humans. It's a way of facing adversities and a way of looking at yourself. And because I see that, well, we still have time and I feel like I'm going on a good rant here, I'll explain this too. Okay, so we have, now that we have the right definition, we need the goal. And for that, we need to understand one last thing, which is central and peripheral affective states and the difference between the two. Central affective states tend to be phenomenally profound, pervasive, and lasting, with far-reaching effects on one's psychology and behavior. By contrast, the peripheral ones are superficial, focused, and short-lived. Its effects are limited. Anything that really gets to you, something that kills your motivation, angers you, ruins your day or week, or even more, whatever that thing was, it impacted your central affective state, and that's bad. But by contrast, if you go to the store and you find out that it's closed, but there's another one down the street, it's inconvenient, it's annoying, you might say a swear word and be on your way to the next one. That's something that just impacted your peripheral affective state. And it's very important that we make this distinction because if something negatively impacts our central affective state, it's damaging to our happiness. But if something is impacting us peripherally, it hurts. But as long as the center is okay, we can accept it and move on. Then we're still pretty happy according to the emotional state theory. And in order to be happy, we found the goal. The goal is to make a strong center that can't be easily moved or affected. And by engaging in behavior that is more likely to result in things that either protect our central affective states or that make them stronger. Like Vivekananda said, waves may roll over the surface in tempests of rage, but deep down there is a stratum of infinite calmness, infinite peace, and infinite bliss. Or Epictetus's quote, who is the guy who told Alexander the Great to move out of his shadow, by the way, I think you all know the story, who lived in a different culture that is vastly different than Haybron's or Vivekananda's, and the others I quoted, said this: I'm not saying that it isn't allowed for you to groan, only do not groan at the center of your being. So you see, things can hurt, and we can't avoid that, but we don't have to. For as long as something doesn't affect your center, then we can shake it off and move on. We don't need to feel any more pain than necessary. If the store is closed, it doesn't feel good, but it doesn't hurt your center. Now, the problem is, if something doesn't go your way, that something that matters doesn't go your way, then it does affect your center. And that's a problem for you. Because if something affects your happiness and it affects your performance as well, it also affects your ability to handle your problem. It's a double, it's a triple bad. And you definitely don't want that. But what can you do about it? Well, let's see. I'll go a little deeper into this in the next episode, but I'll give it a try here. These are perspectives that very happy people have, lessons that are hard to put in practice, but we should never give up on trying to have. They come with age and wisdom, but you can expedite the process if you have an open mind and you constantly try. And the effects are so positive, you can't even believe it. At least from what I read, and I've been trying it for a while, and I feel like my life has changed in the last couple of months researching this. So here are the things. Are you sad that you lost? Be happy that you had something to lose in the first place. You are afraid to lose? Be happy that you have something to lose. Appreciate it. You are not where you want to be. Firstly, update your perspective and appreciate where you are. And remember that for as long as you're alive, you have the power to go there. Enjoy the journey. All of these beautiful things that we have, the fact that we breathe air, the fact that our heart is beating, that we are conscious. When did we start overlooking that? We are a piece of universe that is able to observe itself. Like, how incredibly amazing is that? Look around. Everything around us is dead. The chair you're sitting on, the device you're watching us on, not even the grand sun, the vast galaxy, the biggest dark hole, the most powerful forces in the universe, not even gravity itself can observe itself, can be aware of itself. It can't admire anything. It can't laugh, and it never did. It never will. It can't love, but you can. It's a miracle of divine proportions. I have no idea for how we got to feel and love and think. I'm not sure for how long I'll be able to do that, whether it's temporary or forever. But for as big as the universe is, I can say that I am and I exist now in the present moment. And no one can take that away from me. I felt, I loved, I am, I was, and no losing my job or breakup will ever be as bad now that I know that. My existence, my consciousness is at the center of my being. And for as long as I think and I am, everything else is peripheral. That is the perspective that we need to have. The fact that things are hard are minuscule in the comparison with the fact that things are. And I can see them and I can feel them. If you're not happy with your place in the world, with all due respect, it means they have no idea where you are. And you need to work on discovering that, man, because once you do, then you will see hardships from a totally different perspective. Most problems will influence your peripheral affective states, not your central ones. And understanding that is as life-changing as life itself. Okay, I finished. Let me just add this, because I feel like I was a little aggressive in the last part. I would like to add the fact that I'm not talking about people who have depression, PTSD, or mental health conditions that cause a biological impediment to moods. And I'm not trying to minimize people's problems. You can use this knowledge in graver situations as well, but what I just wrote is dedicated specifically to people who know that they're overreacting or that they should be feeling better in certain situations, but they're not. The message is filled with good intentions. It helped me, and I sure will help others, but I am aware that it might not apply to everybody watching this episode. So do take this with a grain of salt. All right, now I'm done.
No,
Had to put the disclaimer.
that's spot on. You know, and even you know, the disclaimer itself, like depression, anxiety, you know, suicidal thoughts, some of those things are, I mean, they're bad, but kind of to your point, it's also still about perspective. Like, you have a life to lose. And to your point, like, I love the way you frame, like, we're a piece of the universe observing itself, because it's so true. And it's that's a powerful place to be, a very special place to be. And regardless if by society's standards you think you are contributing the way you should be or shouldn't be, by the universe's standard, you are, because you are alive and you are it trying to experience and observe itself. And your experience is just as important as every other person's experience here. So to want to eradicate that experience in terms of like suicide or being depressed because your life isn't something that someone else thinks it should be is a disservice to yourself and how powerful you are as a human here in this time. And I love to your point, like the fact that we as humans, we shouldn't take it for granted that we can love and feel emotions, right? Because it to your point, we haven't always been able to, and we may not always be able to, right? Especially when we talk about this integration with technology and you know, creating robots and what have you. We don't know what part of our brain or what connection between our brain, our heart, our skin, our soul creates those types of emotions. So as we make ourselves less human, less biological, a less of a chance to die, we could also be taking away our abilities to live and feel emotions, right? So this time in humanity, in our evolution, we can love one another, we can feel, we can observe, you know what I'm saying? Like, that's a very special place to be. And if nothing else, right, if you've got some shelter, you've got some food, you know, to your point, that thought should make you unwavering and unbothered, right? Like, I am the universe, I create the things around me, I am not affected by the things around me. Unbothered, right? That was something that we would always say on the San Francisco 49ers, like, we're unbothered. But what does that mean? Like, to your point, like, those peripheries out there, they don't affect who I am, true to my core, my values, my morals, who I know I am to be as a human here in 2021 is very special, and it's different. No other person has been able to live the life that I've lived in the time that I've lived it, which is special. That's the universe, to your point, observing, experiencing itself, loving itself. And it hasn't ever been able to do that with any of the greatest forces that have been created: gravity, electromagneticism, you know, whatever else it is.
They can't love, they can't see, they can't think.
No.
They can't do any of that. We can. We tend to compare ourselves to other humans all the time, but let's compare ourselves to the rest of the universe a little bit. We're the only ones that we know of that are able to see and think and feel. And it's so valuable. Just go and ask someone who is on their deathbed how much they would give to have 1 month of being sad, how much they would give to have one more month of problems, how much they would give for that. You will see how peripheral it is, how central just the simple fact that you are being is. and how peripheral problems are. You know, it's very important for us to realize this when we're young, not when it's too late, because then we're gonna our life changes, and we diminish a lot of the regret that we have. It's very good for us to study and to learn from the wisdom of the old, so to speak, because they've been through it and they know, and their perspective is very important. And so, there's this very, very good exercise. It said this. So people watching this can do that. Close your eyes and think for a moment that you're 100 years old and you're on your deathbed right now. And think about the life you had. Think about all the things you didn't do. Think about your family. Think about all the loved ones that they died before you, and think about all the food that you wanted to eat, and all these things that you still wanted to do but you didn't get to, or that you've been doing for so long and you would like to do again. Think about them and say goodbye to them, because in a couple of days you're done. But then, actually, wake up. You're 20, you're 30. You can still do all of them. You're here right now. You're not on your deathbed. So you see how just closing your eyes and changing your perspective for a little bit can impact you this way. I don't know, when I watched a video that was saying this, I started crying. I don't know, maybe I'm more emotional about this. And then I was just like, okay, now I have to do that. And it's always in the back of my head now. Gosh, I'm enjoying this food. Gosh, I'm so happy I can work on my dream. Gosh, this water is so tasty. Like I became a very happy person since I started researching happiness, and I do get affected. I do get annoyed. I'm having a startup. Of course, I get annoyed most of the time. So, but it doesn't affect me to my core anymore. And even when I'm sad, I'm like, oh, it's okay. I'm gonna get through this. It's temporary. And even when I'm happy, I'm like, that's pretty good. I'm enjoying it right now. This moment, I feel like it's eternal, because we, technically speaking, never lived in the past. Technically speaking, we never lived in the future. We've always lived in the present, and it's been moving with us this whole time. So we've been eternally living in the present. So whenever we're happy, I can say I can live in this eternally happy. I can live in this moment eternally and be happy, and it feels so good when you think about it this way. I love science. I study science a lot. I like cold hard facts. I like to look at the methodology of a research paper and to look at the way they calculated things there and made the statistics and whether it's statistically significant or not. All that, I loved it, and I love it. But I have had this realization not so long ago that we're studying the objective universe, but we don't live in the objective universe. We live in the universe of our mind, which is very subjective. And so, if you think about it rationally, objectively, then nihilism can be easily bestowed upon you. Because rationally speaking, nihilism is the way to go, right? Nothing matters, everything is an illusion, all that. Yeah, it's true. To some level, everything that nihilism claims is more or less true, objectively. But the problem with that is that we're looking at beliefs in the wrong way. We shouldn't be looking at what is true objectively all the time. We should be looking at the beliefs that work. What works for us is having faith in the next day. What works for us is having faith in the people around us. What works for us, and the way we should think about beliefs is not, of course, they should be true, and they should, don't go into delusions, don't go on the other end, but think about beliefs more of what sort of beliefs can I adopt that will help me in my life, that will help me achieve my goals, that will help the people around me. Not what sorts of belief makes the most sense based on a certain type of logic. Because going down that path, you can again easily fall into things like nihilism, which I did for quite some time. And once I realized that I was looking at it the wrong way. I shifted my perspective, and I've learned to adopt these healthy patterns of thinking, and I've bettered my relationships with my family. I've bettered my relationships with my mother, with my sister, with my father, with my grandfather. It's been a beautiful time when I've been digging things out of my past, and I've been figuring things out, and I've started having faith again, which I didn't really have, and I started feeling good. My life is changing. I'm more like, I was a pretty motivated person. I'm even more motivated to do things now, and I'm waking up at 5 a.m. every day, 6 a.m., and I'm going for a run, and I'm working on myself, and I'm doing all these beautiful things that all came from this shift that was just like, stop looking at things in such an objective perspective, learn from the wise, learn from the old, see what perspectives they adopted then when they had all this knowledge that I now don't have, and have faith that both in the future I'll know something that I don't, and that if I adopt these healthy patterns of thinking and behavior, then my life will be better. And so when I started having that, it's just been incredible.
Great advice. That's very good. Yes. And I'll go back to my original statement, right? I do believe that happiness is peace. It's the ability to not be affected long term, right? To not have your center be affected by the peripheral things. The latching on to your values and your morals, understanding your purpose, and being grateful that you have life, right? I think all those things equate to peace, right? And that's, none of those things are material. Doesn't mean you need to be the president of the United States or be a billionaire, because those things themselves are peripheral. They're not inward. They're not your love for yourself, right? It's not sustainable, which is why you see billionaires get to a point where they want to give away more money than they ever made, because they realize that that's not what makes them happy. But helping other people get peace gives them peace, which creates happiness.
There's nothing wrong with chasing big goals. The problem is just don't attach your happiness to them. You know, have your happiness here. Go chase your goals, and don't let that kill your center, because that is the thing that you need to protect at all costs. And yeah, also we need to understand something about expectations, which is, I'll go back to something that you said previously. The world is changing. The world is in a perpetual flux, and we are in this quantitative interaction in between the world and us. And so we're also in a perpetual flux, because we're constantly interacting in between our thoughts in the world, our thoughts in the world, and that changes us every day. We're slightly different every day. Our desires change also, because of the flux and reflux that is happening, like hormonally in our body and all that, in our digestive system, in our gut. Like our moods literally change every day. Sometimes we feel more motivated, sometimes we don't. Our desires change. Sometimes we feel like craving a burger, sometimes we feel like craving a pizza. Of course, it's simplified, but also in a more, in bigger terms. And so the an ever a never changing self is an illusion. You're always changing. And so thinking that you can satisfy that all the time in real time is sitting on a foundation that is very shaky, because as you're changing in real time, you can't physically satisfy all of your needs in real time. Besides the fact they also have hedonic adaptations sitting on your back, so to speak. And so don't try. Don't try that. It's you're losing from the get-go. And so again, the importance of finding the right definitions. And sorry for getting a little technical in the beginning there, but it's very important to establish these things, because these are the foundations upon which you plan everything else in your life. And so yeah, we need to study these things. It's important to think. It's important to think about them deeply, it's important to figure these stuff on your own. I do believe they have everything within yourself, all the tools within yourself to be happier. But it sure helps to study, both the scientific perspective, which is good, but it's only 500 years old. You have things like, Buddhism that's like 3,000 years old. That is 3,000 years old in a written way, but it's actually much older than that. You have Christianity that's technically speaking, again, is 2,000 years old, but is more than 6,000, 7,000, 8,000 years old. All these stories from the Bible are told and have been told again and again and again. And it's very interesting because you can say God wrote it and is like, it's okay if you say that, but the way I see it is like the entire population of that culture wrote it by saying it again and again and again and again. All of the irrelevant details have been lost. Only the thing that is relevant to me and relevant, like it's a big scientific experiment, so to speak, because it went through so many people, and all of these people confirmed the relevance of that detailed, and like saw it relevant enough to say it again, and
It's like
saw it. This person saw
human.
it as relevant.
It's like human blockchain.
Yes, kind of something like that, and it's been confirmed by everybody as accurate. And then it has been written, like all of these, the most important, oldest, and these stories that resonate deeply with us, right? The ones that were the most important have been written in this book, right? And you can't say it's the word of God. You can say that, and I can agree with you. You can say that evolution was created by God, but still evolution existed, and evolution went this way, right? Also, the story, you can say it was made by God, but it evolved by spreading out into the entire culture and then being written in the Bible. So that's kind of the process that, to me, makes the most sense when I studied historical. Anyways, so it has been written in the Bible, and then for 2,000 years, this book was the most important book in the West, and it's still considered as the most important book. It resonates with so many human beings at such a deep level. Sure, you're an nihilist. You don't believe in the existence of God. Sure, you're a scientific head, so to speak. I don't know what the term is for people who are like scientists, scientific supremacy, science supremacy. Anyways, so those people, they don't see any meaning in the Bible, but you should not ignore something that has been resonating with human beings for millennia. We have nothing that has more more wisdom embedded in it on per square meter, so to speak, per centimeter, than that. And so you can derive a lot of human wisdom from reading it, and you can learn a lot of things from trying to understand it. And it's a never-ending source of wisdom. You can read it again and again and again, and every time you're going to understand something else. It's like a piece of art. Every time you watch it, every time you look at it, you learn something new about yourself. You learn something new about the world. And so, yeah, like any good piece of art, this is one of the greatest books of all time. Also, the lessons that we learn from Buddhism. And unfortunately, I haven't been studying Hinduism, but there are a lot of interesting things that you can derive from there as well.
Yeah. Yes. Every single one of those religious books, and it's the universe experiencing itself through generations. And there have
That's
been
actually
something.
the theory that is being proposed by Hinduists. So you know what the theory is?
Reincarnation.
I'm not sure it's exactly Hinduism, but I heard it from Alan Watts, and I'll say it because it's pretty interesting. So imagine that every night when you go to sleep, I'll give this example so you can understand the other one. So every night when you go to sleep, you can dream of doing everything you want. You can dream of achieving all of your goals. You can achieve all of your wildest dreams, right? You do it for 1 day, 2 days, 70 days, 80 days, nothing is dangerous, nothing can hurt you because it's all in your mind, right? You control absolutely everything. You can go everywhere. You created everything. It's all in your imagination. Now imagine being a god and have been doing that for an infinite amount of years, right? An infinite amount of a millennia. At some point, you're gonna start craving a real adventure with real danger, with real unknown. Because when you literally make the movie and then play as every role from the movie, and you know the whole thing and you got all the spoilers, after a couple of millions of years, I think it gets boring. And so, at least the Hinduists say so. Alan Watts said so. I'm not sure if the Hindus. So you do that, and what God wanted from this theory, he said that he created this whole universe, and then he created all of these versions of himself with all of these different states of consciousness, from the animals to the insects to us to probably extraterrestrial life as well. And then he made it so that he forgot that he's God, so that he can play this this game of rediscovering himself and watching himself and going into this adventure. So we're all God, playing this hide and seek game with himself. It's interesting.
Yeah. No, that the duality, there's actually goes pretty deep, and it goes into numerology and geometry and some of those things, and even physics and quantum physics and quantum mechanics and some of those things. Essentially, what it's stating is that, to your point, that God wanted to experience itself, right? The universe wanted to experience itself. And how does it do that? It creates things to observe itself and to discover itself and to fall in love with itself again, right? Like that's because it knew the outcome, whatever God or universe, the creator, however you want to put it. But as it pertains to the physics side of it, the science side of it, they've actually proven that something can exist from nothing, meaning the Big Bang. Like it's very possible and proven that out of nowhere, like a photon can like just pop into our universe and our existence and our dimension.
Particles actually pop in and out of existence all the time if you study like quantum physics. It's something that
oh yeah so that's what created the realm that we're in, right? And it could be an infinite amount of these realms, who knows? But this one here was sparked by whether it was let there be light, right? Or there was the Big Bang, and then there was land, or it was, ash and stuff clumping together. And this point is, religion and science, the stories are very parallel. And to your point, I think it wraps them together, that it's God, the universe experiencing itself and wanting us to fall in love with itself again and explore itself. And the same thing that God wants to do, right? Like you have free will to discover and fall in love with me. Same thing the universe is saying, like, look, go do what you're going to do. Here's the rules of your universe. Gravity is like, only thing you got to abide by, which even that itself is a theory. It could be buoyancy, density, and electromagnetic forces that create said gravity. I don't know, maybe.
We have no idea what created gravity. we can see the Big Bang, because I don't know if you know how light
cosmic works. The microwave background.
Yeah. So basically, if you see the sun, you look at the sun now, you don't actually see the sun now, you see the sun 8 minutes ago, because it's like 8 light minutes away. And so we can actually look 13.8 billion years ago, and through these there are also these clouds, some sort of a cloud that can actually act as a loop, so you can go and look even closer, and light can travel even closer to you. Anyways, so we can see at close moments, like a couple of milliseconds after the Big Bang, and we can study it, and we can study what happened and all that. We have no idea what caused it. We have no idea what happened before it. All we know about evolution and all we know about the world, like the more you study the world, right, the more you study like human knowledge and what we know, it's all just a couple of humans that were born before you, just looking at it and saying, I think it's this, writing it down, Then some people looking at it, testing it. Is it that? Looks like it. Okay, what can we do with this piece of knowledge? Oh, so if it's this, then it's that. So we just add on top of it like this. Everything is just made out of a couple of humans, some pretty smart, some very smart, just looking at things, observing them, and drawing conclusions. All of us and all we see, like all the feedback that we get from the external objective universe, is the one that you get from your eyes, right? The one that you get from your ears, and sensory touch. But everything else, including the way in which you interpret this input, it has and is created by your mind. And so all we know about the world is merely assumptions. They could all be true. They could be true, they could not be true, but the same mind that is making these assumptions also invented logic and rationality. And with it is like a huge hammer with which we hit all of these assumptions. We also invented statistics. And then we're like, okay, so this is most probably true, and this is most probably true, and blah, blah. And actually, we don't even care if gravity works or not. We know that if we or the theory of relativity, we all know that it's just if we put this atomic clock here and we put this atomic clock here, okay, apparently time actually warps the closer or further you are from a center of gravity. So you're like, okay, now we can send satellites into space because of it. And now we can calculate things that will help us with our GPS, and we can put people on the moon with it. We don't know how it works. We just observed it. We've seen that it does work in this particular way, and so we're using it to our own benefit. But however it came into existence, or whether it will keep being this way, whether it's constant, whether it's not constant, we have no clue. And it's exciting, but at the same time it's scary. The more you think about it, the fact that that's where it comes. The more you study and the more you know, you realize that we don't know, and you realize that we have no idea about what is going on. And for me, that became pretty scary the more I looked into it. And that's when, like, what? There's I don't know what his name is, but there's this scientist that said the first sip of glass that you take out of science, you will find that there's no God. But at the bottom of the glass, you will see divinity. You'll see God again. So it's very, very, very true. I haven't arrived at the bottom, not nearly. I'm 20, okay? But I'm starting to see the meaning of that sentence that he made, that quote that I have. And yeah, we don't know. We have no idea. We live a lot on faith. We live a lot on, like, we plan our whole lives based on faith. You have faith that you're going to wake up tomorrow. You have more or less no idea that you're going to wake up tomorrow. The only proof that you have that you're going to wake up tomorrow is the fact that you woke up until now. But that's not good enough, logically speaking, to tell you that you're going to wake up tomorrow. You know more or less nothing, So you operate on a lot of faith, and you use these beliefs because they have been working up until now. And I'll give you this other example just to show how much we could not know. Like, we could not know more than we know. So basically, there are these little simulations that you can make on this little application that will help you, these experiments that will help you determine certain traits that are more favorable in evolution, and certain traits that are not in certain conditions. And so you run this app thingy, and you go, okay, so if you have this much energy and you're this big and there's this much food around you, then how many generations does it take for you to live or die, or things like that. And so they were trying to make this thought experiment to figure out whether our sensory systems, whether evolution supports sensory systems that reflect the truth or not, basically. And so they made this thing, this little program then in which, let's say there's a dog, and this dog can live in an atmosphere that has in between 30 and 70% oxygen. So if it has 29, it dies. If it has 71, it dies. Yeah. So let's say it sees 0 as totally black and 100% oxygen as totally red. And it knows that if it's this nuance of red, then it's 30%. And if it's this nuance, then it's 70%. And it should live in between these nuances. And so that is an accurate way of representing the world. It's based on the truth, and it helps you survive, right? So that is a way in which it works. But there's another way in which it also works, but it doesn't represent the truth. And so what if you would run the simulation and say, okay, if it's in between 30 and 70, then it's red. And if it's in between 29 and all that, like 71 and all that, it's pitch black. Will it also survive then? Turns out it does. Even you're more likely to survive that way. And so how are we seeing the world? And how much is it because it helps us? And how much is it because it's true? And we're never gonna know. For as long as there's a subject, we're never gonna know like the true way in which the objective universe looks. We're certainly gonna know that, we certainly know that in the real universe, there's no such thing as shapes and sizes. There's no such thing as lines. There's no such thing as colors. There's no such things as sounds. So we kind of can figure that out by thinking about it. And yeah, so.
The universe is a very chaotic place, and our brain does a lot of shortcuts to create a more peaceful environment for us to interpret said chaoticness.
Yeah, like look, for example, you don't see things at the level of molecules, and you also don't see things at the level like a planetary level. You see things at the level at which you can grab them, and that is provable from a neuroscientific perspective. So your system in the back of your head that is responsible for seeing things, right, is very well connected to your hands and your body. And so we have this glass right here. I can tell with quite a lot of accuracy, like how much I should bend my hand in order to grab it just by looking at it. It's very well connected with my hand. And so we look at things and we see things at the level at which we can grab them, walk on them, or climb on them, at the level at which we can use them in order to survive. And we see things at the accuracy with which we need to see them in order to survive. We process things, our cognitive ability is quite a lot more than we need, but it's more or less the amount that we have been needing in order to survive. And also I wanted to say one more last thing. I forgot it. Okay, I forgot it. So yeah, there it is. But anyways, I think this is enough. We've been running on a lot here. We took it from happiness, and then we just went on rants about religion and about the universe and about perceptions and all of these things. I think it's been a good podcast. Again, I want to specify this is very important. People who have depression, people who have anxiety disorders, PTSD, and all of these mental health conditions that biologically affect your mood. This message was not meant for you guys. I'm not trying to diminish your problem. It's not perspective, as much as perspective can impact your conditions. These things are actually, neuropsychological, and they're not in your control. I don't know. I'm not a mental health professional, and do not take what we're talking about. This is for entertainment purposes. This is not mental health advice. This is just what's been working for me, and I wanted to share it with you guys in this beautiful conversation that I had with Gary. Also, I'm not sure that was Hinduism, the Hinduism theory. As I said, I don't know a lot about Hinduism. That was what I learned from watching an Alan Watts video. So the source is not the most accurate, so to speak. No, not that Alan Watts is not accurate, but anyways. And what else? Yeah, I think that's it. Is there anything you would like to add?
As you pursue happiness, pursue peace. And I think you'll find it.
Okay, so be happy, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye bye.